Hi, the purpose of today's video is to talk about the 6 Mile Creek area of Lake Lanier, and we caught a lot of very nice fish last year in this area in answer to prayer.
There is a Redeemer, Jesus, God's own Son, precious Lamb of God, Messiah, Holy One.
Okay, so let's start breaking it down. One of the things that I like about 6 Mile Creek area is it drains a pretty big area here off the screen, and that means that it's relatively fertile. One of the things you'll notice is there's a little bit different color in the 6 Mile Creek area right here because it drains a much larger area than, say, the Young Deer area or some of the other creeks. And this fertility is important because the fertility washes down, it gets the phytoplankton going, phytoplankton gets the zooplankton going, and the bait are eating the plankton, and that the blueback herring and the shad, and then the predator fish, the fish that we target, maybe striped bass, spotted bass, catfish, eat all that bait. So the purpose of this video, I'm going to break it down into 3 main sections of the 6 Mile Creek area. The top section is sort of from where the creek first flows in to the bridge, and the bridge is where, right under the bridge the water is about 40 feet deep, but there are some 50 or 60 feet areas in here. And this is the natural cutoff because this is sort of a pinch point or a constraint. So the water north of the bridge is much more influenced by the creek flowing it in than it is by the main lake. And then I consider the middle area, or the transition area here, sort of from the bridge, drops to 60 feet kind of quickly, gets up to about 80 feet at this pinch point. And by this pinch point, where 4 Mile Creek is kind of meeting up with it, it's dropped to about 100 feet deep. And this is what I call the intermediate area, which is still affected by the 6 Mile Creek inflow, just not as strong. And then we have this area here, kind of where 4 Mile Creek meets it, or between this pinch point and the main lake, or Three Sisters Island. This part is a little more like, say, Flowery Branch Bay or Chattahoochee Bay. The water's from kind of 80 to 100 feet deep here, and gets to about 140 feet deep right as these creek systems are meeting up with the main channel of the Chattahoochee. So let's study it in terms of the contour map and the overview of the contour map. And I like to study contour maps just to understand that depth stuff that we were just talking about, also to understand where the good trolling areas are. You know, one of my requirements for trolling is that there's enough underwater features to be interesting from the point of view of pulling the baits. I usually troll up to about 9 lures at a time, pulling the baits over humps and points, but they're running 10, 20, 30 feet down. And I don't like too many underwater features to jump up shallower than about 30 feet because then I'm snagging lots of lures. So I like some underwater features, just not too much shallower than 30 feet. So this area here, south of the bridge, and before you get to either this pinch point or this pinch point, are very nice areas for trolling. Striped bass, spotted bass, pick up the occasional catfish. And then between this pinch point and Three Sisters Island down here is a real nice trolling area later in the year, like from July and August, when the upper layers are really hot and the striped bass are going down toward the dam. There's this kind of intermediate stage, June, July, and early August, when this area can be really good for trolling the striped bass. So let's zoom in on each area a little more and talk about it in a little more detail. So this is the area north of the bridge. And there is a time in sort of May and June when trolling can be productive because a lot of the bait is in between 40 and 60 feet of water. And it's a little tight in here, but you can work the turnarounds and kind of troll back and forth like this in that time period with the bait. And one of the things about understanding creeks the way I do is I'm compensating for not having the best electronics, right? I don't have $1,000, $1,500 sonar. I've got $300 sonar. So I'm not really looking for fish on the sonar. What I'm looking for is bait. And when I'm trolling or even still fishing with bait, if I can keep my bait spending lots of quality time in those big bait balls, the big bait balls of herring, the big bait balls of shad, that's when I'm going to catch fish. So if I tool back and forth here, and I'm seeing lots of bait balls, then I know I can just match my lure spread to the depth of the bait balls, and I can troll back and forth, and I can catch fish. Now this area up in here where the transition is, sort of between maybe about 10 or 15 feet of water here, and about 30 feet of water here, this spot is really great for catfish, both in the spring, once the water temperature warms to about 60 degrees until it gets up to about 75 degrees. There's a lot of shad back here, and the shad back here are going to drive lots of catfish back there chasing the shad and the bluebacks, and you'll pick up the occasional spotted bass and striped bass as well. Usually just fishing live blueback herring or cut shad back in this area here. And the reverse happens in the fall. Once the water cools below about 75 degrees or below 70 degrees, and before it cools off to 60 degrees, again the bait gets clustered kind of back here, and then there's a bunch of the predators following it. Now this bridge area is very interesting here, and the bridge is the main thing that makes 6 Mile Creek, for example, a lot different than Flat Creek. 6 Mile Creek in a lot of ways is the twin to Flat Creek. 6 Mile Creek's on the north side of the lake, Flat Creek's on the south side of the lake. Both of them are very fertile, both of them have a lot of flow, both of them are similar in terms of some narrows and some more open areas. Both of them are pretty good for trolling. Both of them, you get into this upper end in the spring, can be really, really good for catfish and some striped bass mixed in. But the thing that makes 6 Mile Creek different from Flat Creek is this crossing of Browns Bridge Road and this bridge. The bridge is fabulous. When you've got a strong north wind or you've just had a lot of rain coming to the creek, you will see a little bit of flow north to south through the bridge, and it's really nice. You can set up just south of the bridge here, and certain times of year you can catch a lot of fish. Likewise, if you get a stiff southerly wind, you're going to have a little bit of a reverse flow, especially if there hasn't been much rain lately and you don't have much flow through the creek. Get a little current going through this natural saddle point and constraint right here at the bridge. It's a nice place to fish. You can set up at night with a light. You can set up in the daytime. You just kind of tool around a very small area until you're marking bait on your sonar, and that's where you want to set up. Okay, so let's go ahead and zoom out a little bit, or move down a little bit and zoom out a little bit, and let's have a look at sort of this intermediate section, and we'll go to it on Google Maps also. This intermediate section that I like to troll, and it's sort of the area between sort of the bridge right here and the narrows, either this narrow spot here or this narrow spot. And right below this narrow spot is where it gets to about 100 feet deep, and where 4 Mile Creek's kind of flowing into it from this direction. Alright, so this area is very nice. It's wide open. There's some points and humps and features and enough room to turn around, and you can sort of troll a path. And usually what I like to do is I launch here at 6 Mile Park or Charleston Park, and in my first trolling loop, what I'm doing for is I'm just watching the sonar to look for bait. And then if I find most bait might be clustered in this area here, or some days the bait might be clustered in this area here, I just start trolling in smaller loops to keep my trolling spread at the depth and locations where I'm marking most of the bait. And this has a productive area in May, June, early July, and then it turns back on in September, October, and November. Another nice thing about this area here is that there's a couple of boat ramps, but they're not nearly as big, the boat ramps, and they're not close to population centers like, say, Ballast Creek Park on the south side. That huge Ballast Creek boat ramp puts a lot of boat traffic in Flat Creek and in Ballast Creek. And 6 Mile, it's got its days, but up in here at least, due to the smaller boat ramps and not having a big marina, when you're trolling along like this, you're just not facing the level of boat traffic that I often face in Flat Creek and Ballast Creek. Alright, so you can also have a look at that area with the contour maps, and it's pretty open, but you can, you know, hit some points and humps and features there as well. Alright, now the last area we'll talk about in 6 Mile Creek is the area that's kind of closer to the main lake, and I consider that the area between 80 and 140 feet deep, and that's sort of the area here. You can see this is where 4 Mile Creek meets up with it. 6 Mile Creek keeps going here, kind of meets up with 2 Mile Creek right here. So this area is sort of between this constraint and this is Three Sisters Island, is a real good area to troll in July and August when the stripers want to go to deeper water, because the bait and the stripers are getting squeezed from the warm water. The warm water is coming down from the top, and so you've got this warm surface layer above the thermocline that by July it's over 80 degrees and sometimes gets over 85 degrees. So the bluebacks and the stripers prefer to be under that layer, and yet you've also got this layer of hypoxic water coming up from the bottom. So the hypoxic water from the bottom might be getting as high as, say, a depth of 30 to 40 feet. So all the action is getting squeezed deeper than the thermocline, but shallower than the hypoxic layer. And that's when that starts to happen in July. That's when this area here turns on more. If you can keep your lures or your baits at the right depths, that's when the striper will turn on in this area. And trolling for striper in this area in those months, we pick up a lot of larger spotted bass and a few catfish as well.
I tremble at the thought of Judgment Day. Lord, I am not ready. Please don't return just yet, for all my sins are put away. My cross is on the floor and I would burn.